Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for tuning in tonight, rather. I want to thank FATV for broadcasting this program live and to the City of Fitchburg for allowing us to utilize their space in the Legislative Building tonight. Thank you also to the viewing public who may have wanted to meet in person, but due to the current increase in COVID cases, they're watching from their own comfort of their own space. My name is Megan Donahue, and I am the Executive Director of the Fitchburg Redevelopment Authority. And we are here tonight to get a first look at the draft of the FRA's 2040 Urban Renewal Plan. The Urban Renewal Plan is what the FRA uses to set the tone and to provide guidance for a period of 20 years. The FRA began discussing updating the plan in early 2019 ahead of its expiration date in 2020, and eventually hired the BSC group to work with the FRA to draft an update to the plan. Since then, they have worked diligently to devise a comprehensive plan that aligns with many of the city's initiatives. This evening, you will hear from the BSC's group findings and recommendations, as well as next steps in the approval process. Tonight will consist of an in-depth presentation of the plan followed by a question and answer period. Many of you have registered for the meeting via Zoom and are viewing that way, so welcome to you all. Zoom is the only way that you'll be able to ask questions or provide comments. And if you feel like you have a question throughout the meeting tonight, but you haven't registered, you still can register. Please send me an email requesting the link to director@fitchburgredevelopment.com, and I will send you that link. Please keep your comments and questions specific to the draft of the plan itself. I will also be monitoring for negative rhetoric and unrelated remarks. Before I introduce our consultants from the BSC group, I wanted to welcome the Mayor of Fitchburg, Stephen DiNatale, for a few words, but there he is. Hello, Mayor.
Yeah, I took the wrong time to step away. Hi, folks, and thank you so much, certainly for the BSC group. I like what that tagline stands for: build, support, and connect. Very important to our community. We're very, very thankful for your efforts, and we're talking about making some exciting changes, certainly in my tenure, something that I've been looking forward to for a number of years, and some of the highlights of what we're thinking about and what we're focused on are boundaries along Water Street and River Street. I know Megan and I spoke today about specifically Water Street and how important that is, because it, to me, is, I always refer to it as Operation Overlord. If you can go back in your history books and think of that. I mean, that was the invasion of Normandy, and that is one of the areas that I think is very, very much in need of attention, and I think this plan will begin to address that. And also, certainly, another exciting aspect of what you're going to touch on tonight is exploiting, and I mean that in a positive sense, the Nashua River, and making that more of an amenity and tie it into what makes Fitchburg special and why we want people to live, work, and play here, but also to come and visit and see the river. It's quite an asset, and it'll be great if we can push forward with making that even more special to the people of Fitchburg and to our visitors. So again, thank you all for joining us tonight, and exciting things in the future. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Next, I'd like to introduce our consultants from the BSC group, Heather Gould and Jeff Vassar, and take it away.
Thank you, Megan. I have a presentation to give, so I am going to share my screen. And here we go. So we're here today to talk to you about the Downtown Fitchburg Urban Revitalization and Development Plan. And just a quick agenda, the overall purpose of this meeting is to provide a public forum for people to be able to understand not only the urban renewal plan process and the requirements, but also to understand the past history of urban renewal in Fitchburg and the plan that we are building upon as we move forward into the future. In terms of urban renewal plan requirements, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has regulations that we have to follow. And the main purpose of the regulations really are to help proponents determine an area for an urban renewal plan, to figure out if that area is then eligible, and to give an opportunity for residents and citizens and stakeholders to provide meaningful public input. Along with the urban renewal plan requirements, with determining the area eligibility, we have to do an existing conditions overview and analysis, and also look at socio and economic demographics, data, market analysis data, and use this information to help us then create an area, a mapped boundary. Within the eligibility requirements, there are 3 different ways to satisfy them. One would be a finding of blighted open space, which is really vacant land that is not developable for purposes such as brownfields, contamination, environmental contamination in the ground, ledge, which is in the ground, which makes it hard to build on. The second one is decadent, which consists of buildings that could be obsolete for today's standards if it's an industrial or a manufacturing building and it was built in the 1920s. It's likely not suitable for the manufacturing for today's standards. Looking at buildings that are in need of repair, there hasn't been investment in them for many, many years, buildings that have been demolished and not replaced, or buildings that have been taken for non-payment of taxes. Those are all conditions that help to satisfy a decadent finding for urban renewal. The third one is substandard, which is really related to residential dwellings and their conditions. So moving forward with this plan, the eligibility that we satisfy is a decadent finding. We have used data from the city relative to slum and blight for community development block grant funding. The downtown area falls within that. And then looking at a windshield survey where we went through and we documented all of the conditions, whether they were public improvements or private property exteriors, and we feel that the area that we've designated as an urban renewal area here satisfies those eligibility requirements. And then the third part of it with the meaningful public input, that is written into the urban renewal plan regulations to ensure that there is representation throughout the process from not only stakeholders and the city and the redevelopment authority, but also from those who are impacted, businesses, residents, and other stakeholders. So with that, we take the information that we compile and we create a plan of action. That plan of action includes goals and objectives, a concept plan, proposed public actions, so infrastructure improvements or open space improvements, streetscape improvements and the like, and then we look at a financial plan and we pull it all together. Once that plan is pulled together and presented, it goes through a review and approval process. We have a local process, which is an approval from the redevelopment authority. We have a planning board process where the plan is presented to the planning board and they make a finding that the plan is consistent with a local survey, which would be a master plan or a redevelopment plan or an economic development plan. The planning board does not approve the urban renewal plan, but they make that finding that satisfies the requirements of the regulations. And then there's the city council that is required to approve the plan. Once those local approvals happen, there's a state process. The plan goes to the Commonwealth's Department of Housing and Community Development, and it also requires a MEPA review. MEPA is Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act. It's a state agency review, not necessarily permitting, we tend to refer to it that way, but it's still a review from a number of different state agencies that look at the environmental consequences or the impacts of anything that's being proposed. One of the triggers of MEPA review is an urban renewal plan that's written into the MEPA regulations. So until MEPA, from the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs, they issue a certificate after they've done their review. Until they issue that certificate, the Redevelopment Authority cannot proceed with any kind of approved urban renewal plan. And until they get that MEPA approval, they can only get a conditional approval from the Department of Housing and Community Development for their urban renewal plan. Upon MEPA's certificate, DHCD will then fully approve the plan, and the Redevelopment Authority can move forward with any kind of actions that may be contemplated moving forward. Talking about meaningful public input and citizen participation, the Redevelopment Authority moved forward with an open call to the community for volunteers to participate in the Citizen Advisory Committee. And they were fortunate enough to get a diverse group of community members as a result of that open call. The Citizen Advisory Committee, their main responsibility was to provide feedback and act as a sounding board to the Redevelopment Authority. And I have a special acknowledgement to the CAC members that did participate in this process. They met a number of times over a number of months to really help us move forward with really strong, solid goals and objectives and a plan of action. In talking about the actual plan itself, the history of urban renewal in Fitchburg, the Urban Revitalization and Development Program was adopted as a 20-year plan in the year 2000. And when you hear reference to a 2020 plan, that is really that plan that was adopted in 2000. That plan is expiring, and the Redevelopment Authority has moved forward with implementing a new plan. And this plan is going to be considered under urban renewal regulations as a major plan change. However, it's written as an entirely standalone new urban renewal plan document. So this plan, which Megan referred to as the 2040 plan, is extending the base of that 20-year plan from 2000 for another 20 years. And it builds upon the current momentum and progress that's been made. The plan's visions, its goals and objectives are largely the same. They've been fine-tuned. The objectives have been strengthened and are more relevant to the current situation in downtown Fitchburg today. But there are changes that are occurring to the plan's boundaries, designated acquisition parcels, allowable uses, and certain other plan actions. So getting into the nitty-gritty detail of it, the urban renewal plan goals that have been updated with the assistance of the CAC and the Redevelopment Authority are really to revitalize Main Street, promoting an 18-hour mixed-use district being the main priority, improving downtown business environment, facilitating the redevelopment of vacant properties, particularly on the ground floor, and strengthening the relationship with the business community, fostering a vibrant and inclusive community, celebrating the diversity that is Fitchburg, and promoting the downtown as an age-friendly downtown district that ensures that there's representation in working with community groups and celebrating it. Implementing housing strategy, looking at transit-oriented development and mixed income, mixed age housing opportunities, improving the quality and the quantity of the housing stock within the downtown. Making infrastructure improvements. These could be related to accessibility, it could be related to access to Wi-Fi, streetscape improvements, multimodal improvements, and the like. Strengthening the connections and the access to the Nashua River. Really enhancing the green space that's in and around the downtown, connecting the spaces within themselves and to Main Street. Looking at creating a better visual relationship by the downtown, between the downtown and the river? Are there opportunities to promote the properties that are along the river in a way that the public can better enjoy them? And then looking at also building a green and equitable downtown. Now, this is a new goal that the CAC and the Redevelopment Authority actually both very much strongly agreed with, and looking at how to create more sustainable transportation and mobility options within the downtown and the overall urban renewal area, promoting green energy and energy efficiency and construction and the like. Enhancing the downtown presence of Fitchburg State University. In the original plan, there was a very large emphasis on creating a better relationship with the university overall, but also making the connections into the downtown. And this has not changed. The Redevelopment Authority really feels strongly that they need to help to promote the creation of ties that make it harder for students to leave upon graduation, make them want to stay, but also while they're here at the university, how do they get downtown easier? And what services are downtown that they can take advantage of that they would like to see in terms of amenities as well. Looking at attracting tourists, this is not a new goal. This is the same goal from the prior plan. Creation of additional family-friendly venues, looking at how to incorporate public art as a tourist attraction, looking at the marketing and communications of the downtown and promoting it as a friendly business district, and also looking at the lodging opportunities in downtown, and then relating the plan to the city as a whole. This is consistent to the previous efforts and the different master plans and economic development plans that have already been created with the city, continuing the relationship and the coordination with the city. And looking at the area, this map you see here is the original 2020 plan boundaries. It includes a lot of the area north of Main Street. Moving forward, in the red, this area north of Main Street has been eliminated from the plan, and a new boundary line has been drawn. In addition, there are a number of areas that have been added. So we have the area, I want to say north of Main Street again, but this area here encompasses more of the institutional buildings and the courthouse, the Y, and properties that moving forward, there could be a potential for redevelopment in the future. Looking to River Street, we have some of the mill buildings that are there, as well as more open surface parking lots and the like that exist, and are there opportunities there for redevelopment. And then south of the plan as it existed, looking at Water Street and adding an area from Water Street, really looking at River and Water Street as gateways into the downtown and how to strengthen those gateways. And here is the revised boundary map for the 2040 plan. The area in blue, as it encompasses that you have the Nashua River, which runs through, you have the rail trail coming in, you have the railroad that runs through as well. Looking at proposed bicycle and pedestrian connections and how to create off-road or designated bike paths, looking at how to enhance the roadways as they exist with multimodal opportunities, and really how to connect the open spaces and make it an easier network for people to be able to walk around the downtown or bike around the downtown. And this is where it gets into the real action items within the plan. Now, we went through the prior 2020 plan, and we looked at the properties that were acquired by the Redevelopment Authority over the years, and then we layered on top of those properties that either were recently permitted under construction or recently completed construction within the urban renewal area as we had mapped it out. And then we looked at the properties that maybe hadn't had as much attention paid to them or were evaluated in the prior plan, but efforts had not made their way to them yet. And we strategically determined which parcels we would propose for acquisition in working with the Redevelopment Authority and the CAC to talk about an approach to these actions. And in terms of the parcel acquisitions, designating those for redevelopment, for rehabilitation, or for open space. And the open space improvements are in green, whether they're a full acquisition of a property or a partial acquisition for a property. And then acquisition for redevelopment, really, we look at assembling properties together to make a stronger development opportunity for that. Some of the parcels, especially along Water Street, are smaller in size. Some of them are vacant and adjacent to each other. Even if there's different ownership, they present an opportunity to be assembled to provide a stronger a redevelopment. And then we looked at those buildings in the downtown, particularly along Main Street, which were rehabilitation opportunities where we wouldn't necessarily propose demolishing a building, but we would look at helping to promote redevelopment of those properties. And those buildings were determined based on various levels of vacancies, ground floor activity or ground floor activity that has ceased, and looking at how much of an impact those properties would have to the surrounding properties if they were to be redeveloped. And then we took those properties and we put together a proposed concept plan. And we'll go into more detail on each individual concept area. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Jeff Vassar.
Thank you, Heather. And while we're on this plan, just so everybody understands what I'm going to be talking about, this plan is color-coded, and if you look at it closely, you'll notice some of the parcels that have been identified as having opportunity for redevelopment are colored in what appears to be pink on my screen, and others are in purple. The purple are parcels that are more, I won't talk about all of them. Some of them involve rehabilitation of existing buildings. What we're trying to focus on in my part of the presentation are those parcels that are either totally vacant or mostly vacant, and how they could be redeveloped to fit into the community's vision for your downtown area. So with that, I'm going to march through each one of these little bubbles that you saw on that map and explain what's being proposed. I also want to make it clear that because we're proposing a particular type or mix of redevelopment on a particular parcel as part of the urban renewal plan, it doesn't mean it has to happen exactly as we're showing. As the redevelopment authority gets involved, or as the private sector on their own gets involved in a particular parcel, if that redevelopment is in the spirit of what's being proposed here, that's the main purpose. It doesn't need to replicate this exactly. But the state wants us to show that if we are showing a parcel for potential acquisition and redevelopment, that there's a logical thought behind that acquisition regarding what could happen on those parcels if they were redeveloped. So that's the purpose of doing these diagrams, is to show what we think are the realistic potential on many of these parcels. So the first one I'm going to start with is called Area 7. It's on Main Street, kind of west leading right out of the immediate downtown area. On the parcel now is a tattoo business, and it's surrounded by parking on the right side, which this picture shows, the left side, and even behind it, with some kind of shared parking with the church that's behind it. And the diagram at the bottom with the orange building shows what we think is a potential viable reuse of this parcel. And that would be new buildings along Main Street, so that you don't have parking fronting on Main Street. You have the buildings and the uses fronting on Main Street, with parking behind those buildings with easy access from the parking lot up to the buildings. We're showing these buildings, we give them each a particular size. They're one-story buildings that would be commercial use. Retail would be the best with parking behind. It would be great if there was an arrangement with the church that on non-active business hours, a church would be able to use that parking, but otherwise it would be for the business use only, not only, but primarily. And it's also part of this shared parking approach that comes up in the plans like this for urban revitalization. So that's what's being proposed for that area. The next area is Area 8. This is further up on Main Street, leading out of town. Right now, there's an old abandoned gas station on the parcel, and the rest of the parcel is pretty much open, vacant, as you can see in the picture. And this parcel fronts on the river. And across the street from this parcel is commercial use. And what we try to do in looking at redevelopment options is also look at what the surrounding uses are like or could be like, so that what we're proposing fits into the context of the neighborhood or the area we're talking about. So this particular parcel, we're talking about the opportunity for 2 new buildings on this at either end with parking in the middle, as shown here in the gray. The building on the right side would be a commercial building, a 1-story. Again, there's commercial beside it and commercial across the street. On the other end, on the left side of the parcel, you'll see another building, which we think would be a great location for a restaurant or cafe. It's on an intersection, so it would have high visibility. It fronts up to the river. And as the mayor mentioned and as Heather mentioned, we're really trying to take advantage of the river through your downtown and use it as an amenity and wherever possible. And this parcel fronts along the river, and wouldn't it be great if it had some outdoor seating or even the indoor seating that looked out over the river and even across the river to the Crocker Field area, which is a nice view across the river in that area also. But whether it's a restaurant, cafe, or another use, it really is a prime location, and especially compared to what's there now, which is just a vacant paved area.
Yeah, I've thought of some kind of a bridge access across the river going to Crocker Field as an addition to that, Yeah.
It would be a nice pedestrian amenity. People love to walk on bridges and see the water flowing underneath them, but it would also help the commercial viability of that parcel.
Right. Thank you.
Yep. The next area is on River Street. And right now, this area is primarily an open paved lot. On one end of it is a liquor store on the left side of this diagram. On the right side is an small auto sales business, but primarily it's an open paved lot, providing a lot of opportunity for redevelopment. And also across the street, as you all probably know, there's been some recent investment in some of the old mill buildings off of River Street and some proposals to rehab the buildings closer to River Street for residential use. So what we're proposing here is a mix of buildings. The long one in the middle, as you can see, kind of replicates the shape and size and massing of the factory building across the street. And we would propose that for residential uses, 2-story. And again, it kind of fits in with the context of the neighborhood, brings more residents into the neighborhood, which could then help support the commercial use on both sides of this, both ends of this parcel, not exclusively from that building, but with new residential in the building. It brings more of a market for a potential commercial use on the right side, and on the left side, maybe a restaurant or other type of commercial use. And again, these could be flip-flopped either way, but it's a nice sized parcel, certainly greatly underutilized right now. And these mix of uses in whatever configuration may come forward from a developer seem to make sense for this site. Next area is we're going to move to the other end of downtown, on the east side coming into downtown. Heather mentioned enhancing the gateways into downtown. So in this particular area, we're looking at what we've called areas 10 and 11. And if you look at the diagram, you'll see a beige area in the middle here. That is the location of the current, or the former St. Bernard's Church, which is currently vacant and has been purchased and proposed for redevelopment with housing. But behind that and adjacent to that are some vacant parcels. And we're proposing residential on those parcels, either to the, again, upper left, those two parcels fronting along the river. There are other parcels on that first street, some of them recently built, but they're primarily single-family homes. And that's what we are proposing in that area there, to kind of build off of the character of what's happening on First Street. And then on the street behind the church property, you'll see two square buildings there. That area has more multifamily type residential units. So we're proposing that there be creation of, excuse me, two parcels on those vacant, on that vacant land there. And on each parcel could be a duplex, whether it's side by side or one on the lower level, one on the upper level, whatever it may be. But it's, again, more than one unit on there's two units on those lots back there, again, kind of blending into more of the neighborhood with the idea that, you know, it provides more opportunities for housing if it's buildings that have two residential units in them. One of the things we talked about, which we thought would be great, was if the redevelopment authority were to acquire those parcels in the back there, that maybe part of the agreement to sell them was that the owner would need to live on site and would have the ability to rent out a unit to help offset their mortgage. So it provides a great opportunity for either a first-time homeowner or someone who needs that assistance of rental to buy something and be a property owner, with the understanding they need to live on site. And it might be a great incentive and be a great asset for the community to be able to provide that for residents or people who want to move into the city. Moving further down Water Street, you all may recognize this next area based on the large retaining wall in the back, which you'll see in this picture. It's kind of iconic, and across the street is the flea market site, which most people are familiar with, which we'll get to in a minute. But on this particular site here, again, because there was a lot of residential along Water Street in this area, we're proposing residential reuse of this area. And you'll see the diagrams with townhouse type development along here. Could be of different sizes, but again, the idea is efficient use of the site, kind of bundling of buildings on the site. Some of them may be smaller, some of them larger, so it would, you know, appeal to different segments in the market. But a great, certainly the property's vacant, great opportunity for reuse of this area in kind of the context of the neighborhood. The other thing I should mention is you'll see residential, you have seen residential on a number of these parcels. Residential is still an active market in Massachusetts. People are looking for places to buy, to rent, to live in. And a lot of the retail is struggling these days. We still need retail, but it's not as strong of a market as it used to be due to online sales and other such things. So again, we're trying to be realistic and propose uses which we think there's a market for people to invest in. So I should have made that point earlier. Across the street from this is the flea market site. And we feel this is it's an underutilized site, but it's also an oddly shaped site, as you'll see in the diagram that's here. The parcel itself for the flea market abuts some city-owned land, and our proposal is to combine the flea market parcel with that abutting city-owned land to give it a larger mass area. And this may be a situation where the redevelopment authority may partner or retain ownership of the land and lease it out for redevelopment, because this abuts the rail trail. And it also is a gateway into town. So on the diagram they're showing on the lower right side is what we're calling a gateway park. So as you come into the city in this area, you've got this gateway park at the tip here. It helps highlight the rail trail. Then you would have a building that would be more, have commercial use or retail use that really supports the rail trail use, such as bike rentals, maybe a coffee shop, a small cafe, things like that. And then plenty of parking there for the business as well as rail trail users. And even part of that parking lot could be used for food trucks or a farmer's market as such, if the redevelopment authority was to, again, partner with whoever redevelops the site or whoever they lease it to. Then, I believe this is the last one. This is further down Water at the corner of Hale Street. There is some vacant land as well as a building on the corner of Water and Hale. And the thought would be, and across from this, there is, I'm sure as you all know, some new development, or I should say relatively new, it's not brand new, but there's the taller brick residential buildings across the street. And this area is being proposed for what we call mixed-use development, where along Water Street, there'd be a larger building, which could be commercial use, be retail on the first floor. But then on the second floor, on that larger building, as well as the little finger pointing down, would be residential use on the second floor. It could be office use, but again, we're trying to tie in with what's happening across the street and the successful residential that's there. But then as you move up, actually this isn't the corner of Water and Hale, it's between Water and Hale. As you move up and get onto Hale Street, you're certainly in more of a residential neighborhood, and here is an opportunity for duplexes again, similar to what we talked about by the church, where maybe it's an opportunity for an initial home buyer to get in, live on site, have a rental unit, and provide more housing opportunities in the city. And in all cases here, this is a sloped area, so we're taking advantage of the slope with the buildings along Water Street, accessible from Water Street, but their backside is towards that slope. And then as you get up onto Hale Street, the access and driveway into the buildings would be at the lower end, so there might even be an opportunity for parking underneath with residential above, which is at the higher level of Hale Street. So that gives you the idea of what's being proposed.
Thank you, Jeff. And so just to give you a sense of the next steps, the urban renewal plan document will be finalized and the final draft will be issued. The plan will then go through the requisite local approvals process with the City Council, the Planning Board, and the Redevelopment Authority. And then the plan will go to the Department of Housing and Community Development at the state level for review, as well as an expanded environmental notification form that will be completed and submitted to MEPA. Upon the certificate from the Secretary, DHCD will then issue an approval of the plan, and the Redevelopment Authority can move forward in implementing that plan. And with that, the public comment session is now open.
So again, please, if you heard anything that you would like to respond to but didn't register for the Zoom link, please feel free to email me at director@fitchburgredevelopment.com. It's right there on your screen, and I will send you the link. For those that want to ask questions, please use the raise your hand button on the Zoom to ask your questions, and I will ask to unmute it. And then I promise to get to each person, but I ask for your patience with that. Again, please keep your comments and questions specific to the draft of the plan itself, and I will be monitoring for, again, negative rhetoric and unrelated remarks throughout the portion. But first, I want to say thank you to Jeff and Heather for a great presentation. So with that said, I'll take questions now, and I also have, besides Mayor DiNatale, I have Tom Skorsky from the Planning Department if I don't know, I don't think anyone can see you, Tom. But if you have any planning-related questions, he's here to answer that too. So I will ask Tricia Ducharme to unmute yourself, please, to ask the first question. Oh, I guess I have to allow to talk. Sorry. Tricia, are you there?
Hi, no, this is Diane Ducharme in place of Tricia Ducharme.
Tricia, we're having trouble getting you on the line.
Oh. Hi, I don't know if you can hear me or not. Hello?
Tricia, you might want to mute if you're on the computer and on the phone. You might want to mute one or the other.
Okay.
Megan, I was hearing her just fine, so I don't know if it's something.
Oh, I'm
with your
sorry.
computer.
We can't understand or hear. So maybe you could, Tom, relay the question.
Yeah, if you want to repeat it again. I stand corrected. This time I can't hear it either. But somebody was speaking for a moment at least.
Yeah, I was not able to hear anything either.
Okay, Tricia, we're going to come back to you. Sorry about that. I'm going to see if there's any other questions, and then again, we'll come back to Tricia. Councillor Squalia, I will unmute you if you could. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Can you briefly discuss how this 2040 plan relates to the Vision 2020 plan?
That's a very good question. Heather, you want to?
Absolutely. As we started to become familiar with the area, we did a background review of all of the prior plans. And in particular, we looked toward the Vision 2020 plan and the city's economic development plan as we evaluated the goals and objectives that then made their way into the urban renewal plan.
Tom, do you want to add to that? I see your hand raised.
Well, I had a question of my own,
Oh.
so I don't know if you had more as it pertained to connections with planning documents. I could certainly add something as well.
Councillor Squalier, did you get your question answered, or do you have other questions?
That's a good start, but I was just wondering if there's any specific projects in the Vision 2020 plan maybe that weren't accomplished and we're expanding upon that, or any specific projects in the Vision 2020 that we are abandoning for new concepts.
Heather?
So I think we were looking more toward the economic development plan as it was written than the Vision 2020 plan in ways to help bolster and supplement what was in those plans, knowing that the economic development plan relied on the Vision 2020 plan as well. In terms of the goals and objectives, I think the economic development plan itself was very, very thorough and offered many goals that we then had to group together to make it into the urban renewal plan. I do think the emphasis on the walkability of the downtown and the connections to the college, Fitchburg State University, were very important. And I think looking at redevelopment parcels within the downtown and promoting ground floor activity was also very highly prominent in our plan. And Tom, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but I do.
Yeah, sure. Oh,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Heather.
I was just going to say, I do think that the emphasis on making the downtown in terms of traffic circulation and mobility more accessible and pedestrian friendly also has a huge impact on the success of the downtown moving forward.
I would agree with all of that, Heather, and really echo the piece regarding the Economic Development Strategic Plan. This is sort of functioning right now as our 5 to 7 year strategic planning document that is really guiding a lot of our action in what we're doing at the city, and certainly this plan here. The emphasis on the gateway corridors of River Street and Water Street, was seen by the advisory committee and as part of the plan as a critical component to this work, certainly tying in to the rail trail as we see it on the photo here. The one thing, I guess, connecting to my question that I had for the team at BSC is, the Economic Development Strategic Plan had a really strong focus on what we call kind of our in-town neighborhood, basically our downtown from Blossom Street to the Upper Common. And really, if you take a look at kind of the investment that's taking place right now, whether the theater block, Fitchburg Arts Community, City Hall, two-way Main Street, we've got a lot of momentum building there, but we're certainly not finished yet in that work. And we've got a lot of work to do filling vacancies, making downtown more walkable, improving the aesthetic environment, and kind of tying in a little bit better with the river, as Mayor DiNatale had indicated. So I guess one question I had is, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about the phasing here, because at least I recall originally discussions about really starting the focus in the downtown area and then phasing out to Water Street and River Street once we finish this work. But at least in the conceptual drawings that I'd seen, and maybe it's just a function of those being the vacant plots of land where you could really plot out what the vision looks like. But we're looking, primarily at River Street and Water Street in those images. So just wanted to get a better sense of how this project will get phased.
Thanks for asking that question, Tom. As we put together a spreadsheet of the properties that we then recommended be considered for acquisition, we also looked at timing and prioritization of moving forward with acquisition of those properties. The Main Street strip of properties that were identified for rehabilitation are, in terms of time frame, within 1 to 5 years as the priority. And you're correct, Water Street and River Street properties were longer term, later acquisitions, as we discussed with the redevelopment authority as we put the spreadsheet together of those properties. So looking at very strategically certain properties that we felt would have a dramatic impact on the surrounding properties in terms of looking at having investment made in a property that would then trigger nearby property owners to consider making investments in their properties. That focus point was on the Main Street area closer to Water Street and those properties there. And knowing that this plan is a 20-year plan, we approach it as a short-term, mid-term, and longer-term process, and that is defined in the plan. You will see that timing represented when the document itself is issued as a draft.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Cruz, I see that you have a question. I'm going to allow you to speak and unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. I just had one question. You mentioned that the one change to the 2040 plan is a more green and equitable downtown and more sustainable transportation options, as well as green energy. Are we far enough along to be, you can elaborate on what sort of things that are being looked at in that respect, or the vision for that? Maybe it's a question for Tom.
I'll start with the BSC group, and Megan, I'll be happy to supplement.
Thank you.
Do you, well, Councilor Cruz, this is Megan. I think this is still conceptualizing and being drafted as we speak, but we don't have anything to date. Am I correct, Heather? But this is something that we welcome any kind of comments or suggestions, if you have any.
And one thing in terms of green infrastructure and walkability, I know to follow up from previous planning documents, specifically our economic development strategic plan, we had a discussion of creating the connections that some in the community might be familiar with as the Marion Stoddard Trail, which is in effect a trail that connects along the Nashua River, connects sort of downtown with River Street, and certainly you saw in one of the previous maps that we looked at some potential connections both for bike, shared connections, and off-street bike connections. You know, we see those as building off of what we're doing with our two-way Main Street project, but also, you know, one day down the line, maybe connecting with that Marion Stoddard Trail that we've envisioned, and creating that better connection with the river.
And I also think in terms of green and equitable, we look at things like nature-based solutions, which are ways to use the environment to help mitigate against the impacts of climate change, looking at how to enhance the river and it as a resource for, you know, connecting those open spaces as we talked about, but also looking at equity in terms of environmental justice and the principles surrounding environmental justice and the fact that Fitchburg is an environmental justice community, and looking at how you can promote better opportunities and be more inclusive and in terms equitable as development happens, and making sure that all of the different and diverse representation that needs to be considered and acknowledged and welcomed happens as well. So that was a lot of conversation that the CAC had surrounding that goal, and in recommending that goal to the redevelopment authority in terms of those kinds of factors as well.
Councilor Cruz, does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we have a question from Mary Jo Bohart, Director of Economic Development. Oops.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yes.
Great. I had a question about the suggested land uses, maybe like from the BSC presentation we just saw. How fixed are those? I realize that the plan is being conceptualized now, but once the Commonwealth approves it, when something is suggested now that it might be residential, is that somewhat fixed? Or if in the years that unfold, maybe market forces change, needs change, and so on, to what degree will there be flexibility with the types of uses once the plan has been adopted?
I can start to answer that, and then I'm actually going to ask Jeff Vassar to help answer that as well. As you are aware, the plan requires us to identify an end use for those properties that are designated for acquisition. We try, in terms of our consideration, to make them as broad as possible. However, we have been pushed by DHCD to be as detailed as possible when it comes to that. So we try to get a little bit creative in terms of saying mixed use for certain buildings, and in parentheses put office, retail, commercial, or residential, just to try to give that flexibility. However, if there is a change of use that is drastically different than what has been identified in the plan, there is a process to go through, whether it's a minor plan change or a major plan change with DHCD, to then allow that use to then happen, which may be different than what's been identified in the plan previously.
Heather, you explained it well. The only thing I would add is what we presented tonight and I explained was based on the concept plan that was being shown in the actual text of the document, which is more of what DHC is going to be looking at when it talks about land use. We do try to be as broad as possible, as Heather mentioned, talk about mixed use, a variety of uses that would be appropriate for these sites so that any type of amendment is, the potential of any type of amendment is minimized. DHCD is usually pretty good about all that, but sometimes it does change with different staffing and administration. But if it was a major change, not what the state would consider a major change, but a change from mixed use to light industrial, for example, I think you'd certainly want to notify them because it's a whole different type of use than mixed use, residential, retail, office type uses. And we also did talk on the concept plan in the report, there are some parcels being proposed for acquisition, which would become green space, especially along the river. So that kind of gets back to Councilor's earlier question about sustainability and resilient type of development in the area, some green space to provide more access to the river. But if something's proposed as a green space and then it's decided that it's better used as a development parcel, that is certainly something that you would want to contact DHCD about, and most likely they'd want an amendment. Hopefully just a minor amendment to make sure the community knows it's changing from a community use to a private use, or even vice versa.
And Jeff, you raise a good point. This is a 20-year plan, which seems like a very long time, and things change, and the evolution of the community changes and all that kind of good stuff. So we are allowed to amend the plan with the state through DHCD at any time during the 20-year period. And we've done that in the 2020 plan for a number of occasions. So it is possible to make changes throughout the 20 years. This isn't 100% set in stone. Mary Jo, do you have any other questions?
The only other question, and it was more out of a curiosity, is how will the community, or maybe I should say the redevelopment authority, prioritize? You talked a little bit about phasing, but do market forces ever also come to bear if a property that's acknowledged in the plan but in private hands at the moment, if that all of a sudden were looking like it was going to change hands, do certain things move to the front of the queue based on market forces rather than just planned phasing forces?
So that, yes, we would have discussions as a board of directors, and then we would have discussions with the property owners at that point to move forward with any sort of redevelopment or purchasing or anything like that. But again, we have to get that approved by DHCD. So it is a process and an amendment as well.
If I could add to that, also with a plan such as this, a lot of times the development community, those that are interested in investing in property, once they see a plan like this, they may see that their vision for certain parcels is consistent with what the city wants. And it may not be any specific parcel identified in the plan for action by the redevelopment authority. It may be another parcel. But many times communities see that investors are willing to invest because now they have a clear understanding of what the community's vision is. So there may be a sale of property, but it's going to result in a redevelopment or a rehabilitation that is totally consistent with the overall vision of the downtown area. And again, many developers know geez, if I do this, I'm not going to get much resistance because I can see what the community's trying to do. Most likely they're going to be supportive, and therefore it's an easier process for them to come in, get the approvals they need, and move forward quickly on a potential project that they have. So it works both ways too.
Thank you. We have a question from FRA board member Laura O'Kane.
I apologize. I just wanted you to know that the owner of 240 Water Street was trying to get through to you.
Oh.
He has questions.
Well, thank you. Who is the owner of that?
Felicia Lana.
Oh, yes. Okay, I can allow him to talk, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Good evening.
Hi, Mr. Lana. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, it's not really a question. It was just letting you guys know that I kind of joined in late because I didn't get the notification. It didn't come to my email. It came to my spam. And I also submitted some plans and some ideas for the properties we owned. And I just came to find out now that you guys didn't receive them. So I apologized, and I'll have them resent it in the morning.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Lana, if you want to talk more about your plans offline, I'd be happy to.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I'd be happy to talk about your plans offline if you'd like to. This is the director, Megan Donahue.
Yep, that's fine.
All right, thank you. We have Mary Jo Bohart again. Mary Jo, can you hear us? Mary Jo?
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
I just lowered my hand. You had answered my questions from before.
Oh, okay, thank you. It looks like, does anyone, oh, Mr. Capadaglia has questions, so I will unmute him.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Pete Capadaglia, and I'm a property owner in Fitchburg and a member of the Fitchburg Greenway Committee. I just wanted to make the Redevelopment Authority and the committee aware of a project that we've been working on for about 5 years now, and that's a rock walk trail that starts at the Upper Common in Fitchburg and accesses Rollstone Hill, which is just a 15-minute walk from downtown Fitchburg. This project is definitely going to enhance economic development. We've already seen over the years an enhancement in tourism, people coming from out of town to participate in the walk. It's going to promote recreation, trails and hiking, and certainly walking. We talk about all the historic buildings in downtown Fitchburg in the Upper Common area. We mentioned the Nashua River and discussed that along with the railroad. So I think it's not mentioned at all in this plan. I think it deserves a little bit of space in it. And it's a project that's very worthy of completion.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else want to ask any questions? All right, well, thank you very much for all your questions and comments. I want to thank Heather Gould, Jeff Faster from the BSC Group, Mayor Dee Natale, Tom Skorsky, Director of Planning and Community Development from the city, the Citizen Advisory Committee, and the FRA's Board of Directors for all of their hard work leading to this presentation to the viewing public and for your interest in the project. If you have any further questions before we close this evening, Actually, we're not going to take any more questions. If you have any questions after the meeting, please reach out to me at director@fitchburgredevelopment.com, or you can call me at 978-345-9602, or you can visit our website for more information at fitchburgredevelopment.com or our Facebook page. And I want to thank everyone and have a great night.